Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Wednesday, a great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, I've talked about this before. I am not well versed in the Addams Family. I've not seen any real Addams Family content since the movies. Which obviously there's the lovely thing of Christina Ricci also being in this, which is so weird because it's like, because then you think back to like her being a kid playing Wednesday Addams, and now seeing her as an adult. It's just, she's one of those actresses you kind of forget, like, oh, you're one of those actresses I'm not only grow up on screen, like I've grown up with, you know, that's always an interesting thing. Regardless, tangents and all that aside, but I think this is such an interesting exploration because I think Wednesday is probably like such a fascinating character, and kind of having her off on her own. Because my initial thought was, even though I haven't seen it in so long, it kind of gave me like Addams Family Values kind of feels, because Wednesday got shipped off to that like summer camp or whatever with Pugsley. So we kind of get a little bit of that vibe, but the show is even darker, really leading into the supernatural world of the Addams Family, which is an angle I don't think I've ever, I mean, once again, there's so much like from the creation of the Addams Family to like the different iterations over the years. I don't know if that's ever been something that's ever been fully explored. I swear the Addams Family is crossover like Scooby-Doo or something. To be fair, Scooby-Doo's crossover with a lot of different properties, but I feel like that's the case, but maybe I'm misremembering. Either way, I just think it is such an interesting, like, fact of, like, kind of introducing, like, the more supernatural world. There's vampires, werewolves, sirens, gorgons in this. And I was like, that's so interesting, because most things have always depicted the Addams Family in a more, yes, we're surrounded by normal people. Even the movies, I think, never really delved outside of that. So getting a deep dive into the world, which maybe there's precedents for this in because obviously the Addams Family has been around for so long, so that world has probably expanded in different iterations. So this might not be the first series to ever go this direction. I do know, I saw the names. I want to say it's Miller and Go. I think that's how you pronounce the name. I could be wrong. But I believe those are the people who were behind this show Smallville, and even though it was short-lived, I believe they were behind the Shannara Chronicles as well. But either way, Wednesday getting expelled from her school because, yeah, she defended Pugsley. It's like, right, if anyone's going to torment my brother, it's me. And so she ended up, like, you know, didn't kill anyone. One kid lost a testicle, though, so that's interesting. And they tried to charge her for attempted murder, so I don't know how the Addams Family, I guess the Addams Family just has that power and sway to be able to just get that swung under the rug. It's like, yeah, no charges, just send her to an academy. And you're like, because apparently she's been to what, like 8 schools in the past 5 years or something like that. So I find that so fascinating. It's like, yeah, because you never really thought about, because like, yeah, they've always been the outsiders. And that's the interesting thing, that Wednesday is no longer the outsider. She's an outsider going at a school full of outsiders, but even then, she's even more of an outsider to some extent. You know, I think that's going to be the crux of this story. I said jokes. The crux of this story is, yes, you have always felt like an outcast. You've always been an outsider. You revel in being an outsider. You revel in the loneliness of it, but you just might find a place where you fully belong, where you are accepted for you, and no one wants to change you. No one wants to treat you differently. Because, yes, she's called a freak, but other people here are called freaks as well. Kind of find her misfit home away from home. But obviously we also introduce a little bit of a wrinkle, which I was like, I think I read this on IMDb when I was just looking at, because I was curious, reading a little bit more about the show, because I've not seen the full trailer. I only saw the teaser, and then it mentioned her having psychic abilities. I was like, wait, what? I was like, has that ever come up before? It's like, I feel like that's another new thing, but once again, I don't know the Addams Family lore that's accumulated over the years, so that could be something. It feels like that's something new, especially because she's like, yeah, I have not told my brother. It doesn't seem like her mom kind of referencing something like, almost like she knows, but maybe she doesn't. But it's like, oh, she has psychic abilities, she seems to have visions, and it's a new occurrence for her. Because she was making a whole point of like how she didn't want anyone to know, especially she wasn't going to tell her brother. But she's getting shipped off to this Academy Nevermore, which is where her mother went, which I think is such an interesting thing, because I've never, once again, my limited experience with the Addams Family, I've never seen a depiction of Wednesday and her mom having such bad blood. It's like there's such animosity there, which I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I mean, she has issues with her parents in general, both Gomez and Morticia, but specifically she's got heat for Morticia, and I thought that was such an interesting dynamic, you know? And it's like, oh, I know a parent should never take anything from their child, but she's like, yeah, don't ever let anything go to heart. And she's like, well, luckily you don't have one. She's like, now that's the nicest thing you could say to your mother or something like that. But it's like, yeah, she has issues with Gomez, but it's not the same. It's like, I guess it's kind of like, right, daughters and mothers and fathers and sons, like maybe it's kind of like that dynamic, which I feel like that's not always applicable. I feel like sons get easily just as much beef with their moms, just like daughters get just as much beef with their dads. But I guess maybe that's the parallel element they're kind of going here with like Morticia and Wednesday, because we have no idea where that animosity comes from. But either way, this is a place where Morticia kind of shined, and they talked about where her star here, but not, and I guess like, well, Gomez said he met her here, so of course he's a student, but he doesn't really talk about his time here. The whole conversation to begin was mostly about, oh, Morticia, like she was the head of this, she was that, she was kind of a queen bee in her own right. I mean, not in the way Bianca, the siren, is, but just kind of in her own right. She was kind of like the head and of everything, so I just thought that was interesting. The fact is that we get introduced to Wednesday's roommate, who's very colorful and like kind of giddy, and it's just like the very opposite of who Wednesday is. So Enid, who's a werewolf, but she has her own complicated circumstances. She hasn't like gone through, I guess, werewolf puberty to some extent, because she can't fully transform like the others. She can't go full wolf like the others. All she can do is extend her claws. Very much like Meg from Family Guy when she got that being her superpowers. So that's interesting. And even she's going to doctors and specialists about it, and she could end up going the rest of her life never like fully going wolf. I was like, oh, so I think that's the thing too, of like Wednesday's going to put together her own little squad of, once again, at a school of outcasts, there's still this social hierarchy, and she's going to be like the rebellious one who brings forth her squad of misfits. I think will include Enid, will include Xavier, which apparently they have history. They were playing hide and seek years ago when they were 10, and he hid in his grandmother's casket and was almost put into the crematorium. Wednesday only said because she's like, oh, I thought your grandmother came back to life and was clawing to get out of the casket, but it ended up being you. So it's like, yeah, he ends up saving her in this episode. So it's like, yeah, we're even. So I don't know if they specified, they probably specified what he was, and I just don't remember. Well, because I know him and Bianca used to be a thing, so that's a thing. But also, because obviously, like I brought up before, there's the cliques, the werewolves, the vampires, the sirens, and the gorgons. There is one dude that Enid and Wednesday walked by that had no face. Very much like the Question from DC Comics. Just, well, DC in general. But yeah, I was like, what's that dude's deal? Like, I mean, maybe those are the main cliques, but there are probably other supernaturals out there, you know? Because she referred to the gorgons as like the stoners, and it's like, okay, I really appreciate the play on words and the pun. But obviously you have Gwendolyn Christie as Principal Weems. Now, it was interesting. Well, first and foremost, just when I hear Weems, I just think of like Sarah Weems from Rooster Teeth, specifically Achievement Hunter, just because like she was the first person I ever heard with the last name Weems. Just a side note, just to let you know where my mind is. Either way, putting that aside, there was almost like this, I don't know if this almost like a like smiling back and forth thing between Morticia and Principal Weems, because it almost seemed like there's kind of some animosity there, because it's just like oh, we used to be roommates, ha ha ha. And they're like in Ophelia Hall, it's like, oh yeah, the woman that was driven so mad that she ended up, wasn't like her, she drove, it was either was driven mad to kill herself, or she drove people mad to kill themselves. And Morticia kind of smiles, because it's like, yeah, the whole thing is like, they're backwards, and it's just kind of like, ooh, like, I love that he constantly calls her, oh, my little storm cloud. It's like, I think there's something beautiful and kind of cute about the backwards, like, miss of the Addams family, and just how they approach things of like, yeah, instead of my little sunshine, my little storm cloud, like that love-hate thing that they kind of got going on. I like how backwards that is. I think it's so neat. her mom warning her is like, no, 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 you can try and escape all you want, but I've warned the rest of the family. And basically, like, her mom almost being like, you will have nowhere to go. I'm like, that sounds very like, ugh. But it's like, but for her, it's like, no, I want you to stay here. It's from a place of love, because I want you to stay here. I want you to be fulfilled from this place. I want you to discover so much about yourself, because it's like, right, Wednesday, you're so smart, you're so talented. Sometimes you can't get out of your own way. And Wednesday was almost like, almost looking at her mom like, what the hell does that even mean? So, and I think it's just like, right, you get so in your own head, you get so much in your own way of like, yeah, you're going to fight back against everything, that you don't realize the golden opportunity that's in front of you, that this can change you for the better, that this experience will actually be good in so many ways. And obviously they drop off thing to support her, which I love that, because Tyler asked, yo, what's that whole thing? No, it wasn't Tyler, it was Enid being like, where's the rest of them? It's like, that is one of the great Addams Family mysteries. So I'm like, I wonder, does anyone in the family actually know what happened? It's stupid to say this. I feel stupid for saying this. I've never, like, knowing that thing's a thing, I've never once asked about it. Same thing for Cousin It. I was just like, that's Cousin It. That's the thing. It's just, it is what it is. It never crossed my mind to be like, yeah, where's the rest of Thing's body? Is there lore? Is there canon about that, you know? So, that's an interesting thing. She also brought up the fact is that, God, she referenced her uncle, and I can only assume, right, the only uncle, obviously big time uncle in the family is Fester. And she was like, yeah, he was at a monastery. It's like, oh, like he learned something like a monk. And it's like, oh, was he a monk at a monastery or something? She was like, no, he was a prisoner. And I was like, what? Once again, I'm like, tell these interesting things. I'm like, what the hell's the backstory to that? Obviously, I brought her up at the beginning of the review, or discussion. Christina Ricci. I never know if it's Ricci or Ricci. I say Ricci a lot, so I'm just going to stick with Ricci. Their den mother? Was it Miss Thornhill? And bringing Wednesday the flower. I didn't know they were going to, I mean, her name is opening credit, so I'm like, she's going to be a pretty recurring character then, but it's still just, it's like Wednesday and Wednesday meeting. It's like, I'm so happy and I'm so glad, and I think that's so awesome. The opportunity presented itself for her to be a part of this project, that she, might have even like wanted to be a part of this project. Cause I was like, I know this is Tim Burton. She's worked with Tim Burton before, right? I believe well, he did the originals, didn't he? Or am I mistaken? I think he did the originals. Maybe that's also why he was able to kind of get her back, because it's just like, it's like, yeah, the passing of the torch, so maybe that's what that kind of comes down to. But it's like, a Black Dahlia. It's like, oh, you're familiar with it? Yeah, it's a flower named after my favorite unsolved murder. Also, her challenging Bianca to a duel, because regardless of her being like done with people wanting to be isolated, there is something sweet and honorable about Wednesday. Like, she doesn't like people, but probably like less than her not liking people, she hates bullies. Like, that's why it's like, yeah, I will bully my brother, I will torment him, because that's me. Even that line where she was just like, Huxley, you're soft and weak, and you won't even survive 2 months without me. And he's like, I'll miss you too, sis. Honestly, that's actually really sweet. Once again, it's obviously it's Pugsley and like Wednesday. Like, that's just kind of like the known established shtick between the Addams siblings. But with, her like taking up for that kid Rowan, and I thought it was interesting because Bianca was like, yeah, he's not pathetic, he's lazy. And I was like, what's that about? I guess that he doesn't really want to apply himself, because later when we found out like his grandmother was like a seer, or like his mom was a seer, so I wonder, is he one too? And so it's like, right, if he really pushed himself, he could easily, I think that might be what she might have been referencing in retrospect. But her and Wednesday go at it, then it's like all right, 1 point each, let's take off the tips, no mask, first one to draw blood's win. And I was like, oh, it's going to be Wednesday. And I think it's potent, and I think it's important, I think it's interesting that Bianca is the one that kind of did, and it got under Wednesday's skin. It's just like, oh, like, I feel this like self-disgust. She's like, I've never felt this way before. I think it's because it's like, even Xavier is like, yeah, that's typically the reaction people have when they like get caught up in their like, Bianca, like, she came out on top, and it really got under Wednesday's skin. Because I think for her, it's like, people, the popular kids, she looks down upon, but it's also like, the fact is, she got the best of Wednesday. I think that bothered her a lot. So she's even going to a therapist, where like her therapist brings up the novel she's writing. Obviously, there's deep parallels to herself because she's like, oh yeah, how this character Viper doesn't get along with her mother. I wondered. It's like, okay, obviously there's a deep parallels. She's written apparently 3 novels. Obviously, her stories are too morbid to get published. And it's like, yeah, I love that line. What was it? She was like, it's like, oh, and how did you handle that? She's like, oh, I thanked her. About the whole the publisher that turned her down and sent her a whole bunch of mousetraps or whatever, and then hard cutting back to her in the therapy session. I deal well with constructive criticism. I was like, I love that. I'm sure there's a lot of authors who are like, oh yeah, that's so truth to power for some people. You know, I'm sure it's like, oh yeah. Oh yeah, I really take constructive criticism well. You know, it's I love that. I think a lot of people can kind of resonate with that line. But I'm surprised she actually made it as far as she did, because I thought Principal Williams was going to be all on top of her when Wednesday was going to make her escape. It's like, no, she managed to get away and met Tyler. The fact is, she's good at obviously she knows Italian because of Machiavelli's the only reason why she bothered learning Italian. But and she only knows how to fix the machine because it's like, what was it? Because she's got a steam-powered guillotine, and she's like, yeah, I wanted a more efficient way to cut off my dolls' heads. I also love that line of like, he's like, oh, I can't give you a quad, I could give you drip. And she's like, but a drip is for, oh God, what was it? She was basically like, a drip is for lonely people who have like no real purpose or meaning in life. And then they turn the camera to the guy who had the pot in the cup, and he just puts both the pot and his cup down and just walks away. I was like, poor guy, felt so attacked in that moment. But obviously, I guess like that whole sequence where those people start trying to start crap with Wednesday, who brought up the point of like, yeah, it is that complicated thing. I'm like, celebrating people who kind of were helpful in mass genocide. It's like, you know, it's like, yeah, that's why Columbus isn't celebrated like he used to be. Like, you know, when we were all younger, being like, oh, now when you learn the nasty truth about history, you're like, yeah, we should be celebrating that, should we? It's like, yeah. An SOB getting lost and then being like, yeah, I'm gonna take all this. Oh, and I'm gonna hand out all these, and there's all these blankets with disease and stuff, so we can like kill you. It's like I literally watched the show, kind of delving into later elements of kind of. If you watch the English, if you haven't seen it on Prime Video, it's a miniseries. I think it's well worth your time if you're into dramas with a Western aesthetic and vibe to them, because it's set in like the 1890s with tangents and all that side. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised she knows how to handle herself in a regular fight, too, because it's like, well, she's a skill, but it's also like, I'm sure there's a little animosity there for her, too, a little like, right, like, I'm curious, like, how much of that she believes is just her or versus her mother, because it's like, right, that's got to be on you somewhere, but then it's probably a part of her like, no, it's not my mom, it's me, I'm 100% me, I don't get anything from my mother, but like, maybe that kind of leads to some conflict in her. Then there's her run-in with the sheriff, who's dealing with a lot. There's already some murders going on. Apparently, the guy that gets murked in this episode gets ripped to pieces was the third victim, and he believes it's all connected to Nevermore. He just can't prove it. So until then, it's a goddamn bear attack. So, which I've seen that actor in a multitude of things. I was like, what's the most recent thing I've seen him in? Kind of in a supernatural standpoint, I want to say it was the show. It was a short-lived show on Fox called Passengers. Not Passengers, The Passage. That was it was a vampire show. Either way, putting all that aside, when it's all said and done, like, he found out she's an Addams, he was like, was your dad Gomez? He should be locked up, he's a murderer. And you were like, huh. And obviously she wants to investigate that, but I'm also wondering, is there a part of her that's like, it's because she has her image of who her dad is, and it's like, oh, there might be more to you than I think. Because luckily later on, Tyler, the sheriff's son, gives her the file, and we didn't get to see it, but she is reading it. So, and obviously she doesn't tell her parents about what she's discovered and everything that's kind of going down. So, I did like that she ended up finding out about Thing, and it's like, cool, you can either be loyal to me or I can stuff you in this drawer until you basically claw your way out and, you know, trying to get out. And obviously damaging that lovely skin of yours because I know how vain you are, which is interesting to think about him being vain. I also love later on when he gets called a pet by Tyler. He like obviously flips him the middle finger. It's also like, yeah, also speaks volume when you lose a battle to a single hand, because he had the bat and everything, and then the thing just took the bat from him and tossed it. I'm curious, once again, just a me thing. Does Thing have the strength of a normal human, or does Thing actually have superhuman strength? That's what I'm curious about. Or is it actually just a regular hand, and it's almost as if it was attached to a regular human being, so it still has to, not even trying to get into the science of how Thing is able to grab a bat and toss it out someone's hand, but I'm curious, does it have the strength of someone who, it's like a hand, but it has the strength of if a full human being was behind it, or does Thing just naturally, whatever they are, having just natural superhuman strength? Now, is it an important question? No, but once again, this is me thinking about stuff that as a kid I would have never thought about. As a 30-year-old, I'm like, huh. Once again, didn't even think about the whole, Thing doesn't have a body. Never questioned it as a kid, just say, that it is what it is. I didn't talk about it, but we got an instance of just how brutal this show can be. Once again, having only seen the teaser trailer, I saw that things could get bloody. Obviously, the whole pool scene with the piranhas, but even in this episode, when they show the accident and the guy's neck was broken, I was like, geez, I wasn't expecting them to actually show a close-up of that and everything. But, so I think we can expect the show, obviously, to be dark as it is, but also kind of lean into some of the violence and just kind of the bloodiness of things. But, I thought that Rowan situation was kind of, I didn't expect that, because there was a whole thing, he was looking at a book, he tore out the page, I was like, what was that about? And then there's the whole situation of him, he ran into Wednesday, because Wednesday had a vision, and it felt like, oh, something's about to happen, and she tried to protect him, but in fact, he's actually trying to kill her. I thought, at first he had summoned something, he's like, oh, I'm gonna get back at the bullies, and it was gonna turn around and kill him. It's like, no, his plan has always been to kill Wednesday, because it's like, right, my mother had a vision, she was a seer, which I think is ironic and interesting, considering Wednesday's developing kind of those powers of insight. We have no idea beyond that what that's developing into, because his mom being a seer and him being a seer makes you wonder, is that what that's the reason why he was able to hold her back like that? Because it makes you wonder, it's a full gambit of psychic ability. So if you're a seer, will you eventually develop telekinesis like he does? Does that mean that's something in Wednesday's future? But Rowan believes, you're the girl my mom drew about. You're going to be the destruction of the academy. And so he didn't it didn't seem like he wanted to do it, but he knew, my one purpose, my one goal is to kill this girl to kind of save us all. But Wednesday in turn gets saved by some creature. And at the end, in the credits, they refer to it as a Hyde creature. And I was like, I could definitely see that Hyde element to it. So I'm like, okay, so someone's got a whole Jekyll Hyde thing going on. Question is, who is it? My money's on Tyler, just because he's the normie. I could see that. It feels like it could be Tyler or Xavier, or maybe it's just someone else entirely, but I'm like, that's what my money's on. It also seems like this person also who saved Wednesday, isn't the killer that killed the other bodies? Cause we have no idea how that Rowan thing is handled, because I was worried. I was like, oh man, Wednesday's going to be found on top of the body. I mean, there might be evidence because she was on top of him, but who knows if there's any transfer or anything. But because the next scene we got was the ending where her parents called. So we have no idea what happened in between. Did she report the crime? Did she just disappear from the crime scene? But yeah, the fact is, it ripped into him because it clawed his body up, but it didn't rip him to shreds like the third victim was. That guy was pulled literally to pieces, and it's yeah, we have no idea where the other bits are. It's oh, there's an arm, there's part of the torso, there's this and that. So that wasn't the same thing, and this was to protect Wednesday. So so the other murders are something else entirely, but this creature's most likely going to get blamed for it. So, and that's what I thought was so interesting, because I didn't know what to fully expected the show going into it. And then I find out not only is obviously there's this heavily supernatural side of things, because I guess it's always somewhat been there with the Addams family, but I wasn't really sure. But I also find out there's kind of this crime mystery, because it's there's a murder mystery going on, but also from the very beginning, Wednesday was there's something off about this school. And not just it being a school, there's just something not right here. So I'm assuming that's going to have something to do with some secrets from the past associated with her family, specifically stuff with her dad, maybe stuff with between Morticia and Principal Weems. And obviously this prophecy about her being the one that ends up burning down his academy and what that's all about. a very nice introduction to this show, kind of giving you a little feel and taste of kind of what's to come. But I'm very, very excited to see where all of this will ultimately end up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.